Yes, y'all. We are here, CFRU 93.3 FM, and we've got Mark from Collective Evolution on the phone with us. How's it going, Mark?
It's very good. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome, thanks. It's fun. I was just showing a little bit of some of the clips from the videos so that people could kind of like hear a little bit in the background, some information on what's going on. They're just talking about, beliefs and changing our belief systems and stuff like that, and recognizing that we're all stuck in kind of like a program pattern of the way that we, kind of view the world and how things happen and operate. And it's talking about how we need to kind of make a change and make a shift to that so that we can all be able to get to a better place, a more evolved state, more harmonious with nature and stuff like that in the world.
Sure.
And, it's a great message. What you guys are spreading is basically what I want to say, and thank you for getting those messages out there. I think it's very crucial for people like yourselves to come together and get these videos made and put that kind of information out there for people to get and kind of question themselves and figure it out, because this life is a big journey and it's always good to find out the answers. So I'm excited to ask you some of the questions that I have about these videos that you guys do, and yeah, just basically like how did it all get started? How'd you get involved in it?
Well, Collective Evolution itself started before I even joined it, because I joined it about 1 year into its existence. But it literally started out as just a bunch of people in a basement working together, all just each going through their own individual experience and realizing that the way things were done just didn't make sense to them anymore. And I mean, they all had their own individual journey, and I had my own at the same time too before I had met the rest of the CE team. And it was just something that we wanted to see change. Some of the things you touched upon at the beginning there, just we all didn't necessarily resonate with the current system. I mean, we respect it for what it is, but we just wanted to do something different. And we saw some alternative ways, because this information does exist. And like, that's the power of the internet, that you just do a little digging down the rabbit hole and you never know what you can find. And one thing leads to another, and it just became something that we all became passionate about, that not only making changes in our own lives, but doing whatever we can to try and inspire people to make it in theirs, or at the very least just get informed about things that are just beyond, I guess, the mainstream or the norm.
Definitely. That's good. And you can tell the passion shows through in the videos and stuff. You guys definitely care about the information that you're putting out there and stuff. And I think it does change lives. You're able to affect people, and there's so much information out there on the internet that basically, as long as you're willing to sit down and watch some videos and really like try and gain some knowledge, there's a lot of information. But I want to know, how do you decipher through all the craziness and the madness that's out there? Because there's a lot of things as far as like conspiracy theories go, or like information on this and that's all floating around on the web and can kind of take people off track a little bit, I think, on the important issues and the things that we can really handle and directly influence with ourselves. So how do you sift through all that craziness?
Well, for sure, there's definitely tons of stuff out there, that's for sure. And the answer I'm going to give might not be as flashy or as exciting as some people might be hoping for, but usually the best place to find the answer for that is within. I mean, we all have within us our own kind of what resonates, what doesn't resonate, our own internal guidance system, if you want to call it that no matter how much information you go through, before you let the mind exhaust itself looking at the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, all this mumbo-jumbo that you can do to every piece of information out there, and there's tons of news sources that do that, the answer is always instinctively there. And I think that what we do is we find this information, we obviously research as much as we can to support it and to make sure that it is true and all that stuff, but also what resonates and what doesn't resonate is kind of at the backbone of it all. Mm-hmm. And what we do at Collective Evolution, or at least what we make a big part of what we do, is that everything that we share, we do it from a state of more neutrality. I mean, a lot of these other websites that are out there, these people out there, and we totally respect the work that they do, absolutely, because without them, a lot of us wouldn't even be where we are right now. But they like to take a particular side, and they like to get angry at the system, or they like to get angry at what they find, and they want to get people riled up behind it, and they want to start instigating change in a way of destroying what's currently there. Mm-hmm. Versus we just find this stuff, and we share it and let people kind of do what they want to do with it. We want people to use this information to create changes in their own lives and to inspire changes in other people's, rather than get angry at the system. Because even though that seems like we're doing something, the more we get angry, we're kind of just perpetuating the same system to stay in place. Yeah. You know, it's about actively making the change as individuals rather than just getting angry at what's there. So that's what we try to do on that end. And the best way to kind of do that for most of us, and I think most of the team would agree, is first looking inside. I think we all, and you have the same thing within you and everyone else who's listening to this, we all have our own internal guidance system, which is kind of able to sift through the BS, for no other way of saying it.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah, no, that's very true. And anything that you watch online, you feel when there's something kind of fishy going on. You're just like, wait a second, this doesn't, no, this isn't right. And when something comes along, you're just like, wait a second, this makes sense.
Exactly.
And that's what I think a lot of the stuff that you guys put out in the content, it's a lot of it makes sense. And it just, when you watch it, you're just like, okay, I can see that. I can feel that. And I like what you touched on there about how we're so quick to label information as we get it, as just good or bad. Right. Mm-hmm. And I had this conversation with somebody recently, just about how she was saying somebody mentioned, someone was just having a conversation. They said something and one of her friends turned and kind of like said, oh, well, is that good or is that bad? And it's kind of like we have this notion that everything can either be black or white. Yep. Whereas I think it's a lot better when we keep it a gray area and kind of leave it open for them to decide. You don't have to really place it as good or bad. It's just information. It's out there. You can kind of take it as you will.
Exactly. Yeah, we've found that, because we obviously get both sides of the coin in the work that we do. Every piece that we write out or every video that we make, you're always going to have people who are in support of it, and then there's always going to be the people that are against it, or when they see it, it triggers something that they're holding on to, so they react a certain way. Mm-hmm. And by staying kind of neutral towards it and respecting each individual's journey, you'd be surprised at how quickly these people that 1 second are ready to rip your head off for a particular statement that you made, a couple months down the road, suddenly they're just very receptive to your work because we didn't force it upon them. We didn't fight back. We didn't try and stay in that same consciousness, because that's when people kind of stay trapped rather than just respecting where they're at and trusting that they'll come to find whatever they find, whatever they do, right?
Oh, it's such a beautiful thing. I love that. I love that so much. Even in the line of work that I do with like promoting and doing shows and stuff. Yes, there's a few people that at first are like, whoa, I don't know about this, and kind of like jump out. And then after a while, once they kind of see what's going on, and a few months later, they're coming around like, how do I get involved? Like, this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely good that you guys have that going on in there. Some of the things that I wanted to talk about, specifically having to do with the videos. The one thing especially is the Sungazing thing, because it caught me off as soon as I watched that. I talked about it on the radio show, and I've talked about it a bunch of times since then. Is like, because it kind of blew me away a little bit that there's this dude that can live forever off just like sun gazing, and it's this new thing. You can just get energy from the sun. It kind of makes sense. I get it with the whole photosynthesis thing, and like, the plants, they get the sunlight and they just need the water and they're good, and like maybe we can make that for humans. Is there any science behind that for people that don't know about it? Tell them a little bit about it.
Sure. Yeah. No, sun gazing is the practice of basically receiving all the nutrients that your body needs in order to function that we normally get from, let's say, water or from food and other sources of nutrients, vitamins, whatever the case you may be taking. Instead receiving that from the sun. And you would do it by actually gazing at the sun at two specific periods during the day, one close to the sunrise and one close to the sunset, and not in between because the sun is too strong, and we're not looking to burn anybody's retinas here. But the sun itself is just basically capable of providing you with the same nutrient level. However, why it seems so far-fetched, and why, like, even myself, I'm not practicing sun gazing in the sense that I'm still eating food, as is everybody else in the team. It's just, it requires the consciousness aspect to it. And I think almost everything requires the consciousness aspect to it. And that's what we're really discovering and we're finding in a lot of the work that we're doing, because you need the consciousness to support it. I mean, just the other night I was on another radio show talking about the placebo effect and how much of a role consciousness can play in that. And there was a story that I had heard not too long ago about a little boy who his family was not in a very good, wealthy position, and they weren't able to provide him the care that he needed, and he was very sick. So what they basically told him was they gave him a candy every single day, and they told him that this candy was going to heal him. Yeah. And several months down the road, the boy was completely healed. Wow. Because the power of consciousness, he fully believed in what he was consuming was going to heal him. And it's the same thing with sun gazing. I mean, they're very different from one another, but if you truly believe and you have the consciousness to support the concept that is sun gazing, there's no saying that the science behind it, which is some of the things you touched upon, such as photosynthesis, that it isn't capable of providing you with the same nutrients. But are we, as a collective, at a point ready to accept that and ready to fully embrace that? No. When we will be, if we ever are. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the current way of getting nutrition, but we're just showing it as a way to really open people's eyes, just like you said with the people you've been talking to and some of the other shows you've been doing. It's a great conversation starter, and it really instigates people to look into consciousness. And that was the whole purpose behind its placement of the doc, to show people that the power of consciousness, that anything truly is possible when the consciousness supports it.
And that's something I 100% stand by and believe in, is that anything is possible philosophy. The biggest thing that caught me was just I was like, this is an alternative way of getting nutrition that I've never heard of before. You know what I mean? And that's what kind of really sparked my interest. I was just like, this is out of this world. This is something completely new that just made me question. It really made me question even simply how it was talking about how we're conditioned to eat specifically at 3 times during the day, to have our meals at breakfast, dinner, supper. And it's kind of that's been so pushed on us throughout society. And I don't generally eat like that. It's really sporadic and different. And when I feel hungry, I'll eat. You know what I mean? And I feel like we shouldn't be living with that strict eat mentality. And that's how we have obesity rates through the roof right now. And it's a little bit crazy. But yeah, I like talking about things that we forget as society goes on. I think something like Sungazing and what you're talking on about our belief system and consciousness, how that really does affect what actually is the outcome. When we really do get behind it and believe in something, it manifests and it makes that thing possible. So back before there was science as it's stated now, they didn't really need to check things and check numbers and get instruments involved. They could just kind of go with an idea and just let that run with it. What are some of the other things that you've found are something that might have been an ancient kind of knowledge that we might have had in the past that we've forgotten?
Well, yeah, for sure. It's a great question. And before even going ancient, I think the thing that in regards to the science is we have this general thing, and I know you probably know this yourself. I mean, you're doing this broadcast through a university. We have this idea of what is verifiable science and what is something we can trust and what is something that we cannot trust. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in now, so much of what we think we can trust is corrupt anyway. There's corporations at the top of it that are purchasing these so-called peer reviews that make people suddenly trust anything they're reading. And if you look in the modern world, subjects such as vaccinations or subjects such as chemtrails and stuff like that, that people will read these articles and they'll read these reports, but because they're not peer-reviewed, they're not going to put all of their marbles into that basket. They're not going to fully believe it. Meanwhile, the articles that support the opposite of it are peer-reviewed because certain corporations at the top are purchasing that. So I think before we even go further in history, it's important to look at what's here right now and kind of take a look at what the idea, what we can trust and what we can't trust. Where did that exactly come from? Was that programmed into us, or is it something that's naturally occurring? Because I think that a lot of us, what we do trust and what we don't trust has been programmed into us. And that would be the case with something like Sungazing or something like that. It might sound far-fetched, it might sound preposterous, and no, there may not be a socially accepted peer-reviewed study that supports it, even though there were studies done, and I mean, he was studied by several scientists all over the world that recognize it, but that information is suppressed because it doesn't support the main agenda. So I think we need to kind of strip away our expectations of what is scientifically acceptable and what is proved versus, what we just feel inside. And that's why I think that's the first step before we even look at anything else in the past. I mean, there's tons of other cool things. I mean, you can talk about crop circles. That's coming to mind right now. You can talk about some of the meanings of the pyramids, and people have certain theories about them being portals and stuff like that. There's just so many cool things that even aliens and ETs in general, I mean, all this stuff gets suppressed because there's this mainstream belief that it needs to have certain peer review or certain scientific support for it to be legitimate. But even when things have that stuff, is it actually legitimate?
Yeah, it's just too bad when like the crazy hokey people get involved, and then, or the disinformation type agents that get involved in these conspiracy theories and just kind of like blow everything out of proportion and ruin it. A couple bad apples just ruin it. But we try and as a collective, gather together, and you can point out the ones that are a little bit loony and figure out the ones that are on the right path, I think, for sure. One thing you were talking about there is the main agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know this is something that's talked about, and we're all quite aware of the whole 1% versus 99% or 99.9%, however you want to see it. There's definitely a sway in the system, and there's a lot of people up at the top that are kind of controlling things and calling the shots as far as politics goes, money goes, and environmental issues go, and everything, right? What do you think some of those main agenda topics are? Obviously, the one we were talking about is, the Sungazing. That doesn't support the main agenda because we want to keep people consuming. We need to make sure that the lineup for the drive-thru at McDonald's is quite full all the time, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think basically you can look at any of the major industries of the world and look at the way that they're run versus the way that some of the alternatives show that they can be run instead, or at least could be shared and co-implemented. I mean, you can look at the education system, you can look at the religious institutions, you can look at the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, that's a very obvious one in my books and in our own studies of that. It's like we have the pharmaceutical industry that if you really look at it, it seems as if it's designed to just keep us sick. I mean, we're not something profitable when we're healthy. We're not very profitable when we're dead. So instead, why not just keep us sick? So we have these treatments, whether it be pharmaceuticals, whether it be treatments for major diseases that kind of just mask the symptoms temporarily rather than actually cure us. Meanwhile, there's so many incredible things that are naturally occurring within the planet that are fully suppressed. Things such as cannabis or the power of hemp and hemp oil. We're talking about other alternative cures for various diseases that are completely suppressed just because it's not profitable. So I think you can look at almost any industry and look at the way it's currently run and the way that it's promoted to be run, and you'll probably find some level of corruption in regards to what's the main agenda versus what makes sense.
Definitely. I think you hit the hammer on the nail with that one there, with the cannabis, for sure. I just had recently Mike Schreiner, who's the leader of the Green Party here, on for an interview, and that was one of the main things I always talk about, that as far as the political systems in Canada and all over. I think Green Party supports it more than the other ones, and just I'm really down with anybody that understands that that's just complete travesty, that is not a legal substance, because there's no real harmful effects, and it's quite obvious tobacco and alcohol are way more harmful and cause a ton of more deaths and cancers and all sorts of harmful things, and they're legal and everything's okay because people are profiting and making tons of money off it. I think we can make that change and make that shift, because there is a lot of corruption going on, and so much of it doesn't make sense to me, Mark. I like it. I'm just like, it makes me angry as a citizen, as a human being that feels that we should be able to make our own choices in this life and figure out what's right and wrong for us through those choices, and having certain substances, made unavailable to us and, scared to use because of the repercussions. Obviously, it's a sad thing, and I think we definitely need to change. So that, definitely. Cannabis for sure. And big one is also that the Green Party is involved in is just the environment as a whole, that we don't really care about it. And I think that care that's been put into human beings, into us, has been put there by the corporations and by everything that's buy and consume and use. You just use it and then throw it out, and buy a new one. And everything's temporary and doesn't last very long because they need to sell you a new one in 5 years, right? That mentality has been put into people's brains, and we need to change it. We need to rip it out.
Yeah. And I think that time is coming, to be honest. And I think that's why you're doing shows like this. That's why we're writing articles and making these documentaries. And there's so many great groups doing this stuff, even if they're only focused on a particular niche of it. But there's so many of us that are realizing this, that are sharing this, that I think the time has come, that this stuff is going to get so much to the surface that suppression of it is no longer an option. Because, even just looking, you just finished talking about the industry and stuff like that in regards to like energy and the environment and stuff like that. The fact that we're still suppressing and limiting ourselves to such minor adjustments such as like solar or wind, which are great. I mean, they're great changes, but the fact that we're saying that that's the only option, that's such an expensive way to do it. Meanwhile, we're giving no credibility and no public recognition to the idea of free energy or to the idea of the water-powered car or anything like that. All these things that do exist, that if we did put all of our attention to them as much as we put to the so-called oil industry or anything like that, we can have these things implemented tomorrow. It's just a matter of what's profitable, what do they have control over, you know? And so I think that it's really important that we continue to do what we're doing, because the more mainstream this information becomes, the more impossible it becomes for them to suppress it, because we as a society will demand to see it otherwise. Mm-hmm. So I think we're definitely going in the right direction with a lot of these things. And I think as sad as a time as it could be to be living right now, it's also a very exciting time. So I think we're on the cusp of something really awesome, to put it in for lack of a better term.
I feel it too. There's definitely the shift, the change in consciousness. It's around this time it's happening. People, you know, all these conversations that I have like this one right now and with other people, like, it's proof that this change is happening. The biggest thing I'm always worried about is like, what do we, like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel these kinds of ideas, this whole like, let's get harmonious with nature and like love and do yoga and stuff, you know what I mean? That people are just giving, like, eat vegan, don't eat meat and stuff like that. The like mainstream is never going to accept it, because it's like, oh, these are just a bunch of washed up hippies and stuff, and like they're not really serious. They're just like kind of wishy-washy, kind of going about things, which is the same criticism that I know even like the political parties like the Green Party get and stuff like that come out with kind of like ideas that question the mainstream and aren't kind of like along those lines. And there's not much like machoism and like manly aggressive kind of like energy in it that's all in the mainstream, you know what I mean? And I feel like, how do we get that change to get people to recognize that these are important issues, you know, and we need to get them out there? And this whole idea of violence and messing people up and like guns and killing and all that stuff, like, how do we combat that stuff? Because it's so prevalent and it's so out there, and it keeps infecting our kids through video games and all sorts of craziness, television, movies, commercials and stuff. Like, how is it possible that us, the people that let's be harmonious with nature, are ever going to be able to get out and get, you know, past that? I don't know. Maybe it comes back to that story that you were saying, where you're just like the guy that, you know, in 2 months later, he eventually comes around because he recognizes it's kind of like a good thing going on here. Maybe that. I
think the best thing we can do is to make sure that first and foremost, we start to be the change ourselves. I mean, it may feel like we're just a tiny fish in a huge sea, but ultimately, any message that we share, just like conversations that me and you are having tonight, it's going to resonate that much more deeply, and it's going to create that much more profound of an impact for people if we are also living examples of what we're saying.
Yes.
So I think that that's a huge statement for people to make, is to start to do these things. Start to come together. Start to practice what you're actually preaching or what you're discovering. And a great way to do that is to even fully embrace the fact that you found this alternative information. I mean, how many people... I mean, we can see the statistics on the back end of our website of how many people are coming to this information, but how many of them are openly sharing it afterwards and are ready to admit that they're coming to this information, that they're sharing it, and that it resonates with them. And that's a huge step. If everyone who actually came to our site or other websites or listened to your radio shows, if they actually took the practical step of admitting, this is what I'm into, this is what I found, look at that, without being afraid of the backlash, without being afraid of anything like that, it would naturally get to a point where it would be everywhere. Because with the power of the internet, I mean, it's a beast in so many other ways, but the power of the internet makes us almost unstoppable, that this stuff can get out there. So the best thing to do is to first embrace what you're discovering, share it with whoever around you. I mean, if people are going to reject it, you respect their journey. You don't need to push anything. And seeing the changes in your life, seeing what, just like you starting this radio show, doing things like this is a great step, because you're actually being the change of what you found, right? So, it now may sound like nothing, but the more of us that actually do this, the more concrete the potential for change becomes. I mean, there's other great little projects we can do, you know, in regards to things such as the environment. I mean, the whole idea of community gardening is a great thing that we can start to implement all over the place. I mean, I know it sounds small scale once again, but you have a whole bunch of small scale communities doing that, and suddenly it's a big scale project. You know, and it reduces the other things that we're currently dependent on. And there's so many things. I know right now we at Collective Evolution are working to get more concrete things that people can instigate in their own communities, because obviously we don't have the manpower to communicate with everybody, but we want to impact everybody, because you would be amazed by the number of messages we receive every day of like, I love your message, I love what you're saying, I love what you're doing, what can I do? And we love that energy, so we're trying to work on ways to inspire people and to get people to do things. So that's definitely something that we're working on, and it's something to look forward to. But in the meantime, the best thing to do is, or the best thing I could suggest is to just really embrace what you're discovering and share that without any attachment to how others will respond to it, but to just fully be what you're discovering, because it is exciting.
That's great. That's a great thing. That's a great thing. And I think that's so crucial for people to understand, is just that not having a fear of what other people are going to think. That's so crucial. This is something that keeps coming up in conversation again and again with different people, is, you know, not being held back by what other people think. So if you see something that is firing you up right now, share it. Let people know about it. It's so crucial. And don't be afraid about that. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Word up. Well, I know I kept you for a little bit longer, but that conversation was going, man. It's cooking. It's cooking.
I had a great time. I didn't mind at all. It was cool.
We'll definitely have to do this again in the future, man. Much respects. And for everybody out there listening, go and check them out on Facebook, Collective Evolution. Their likes are going through the roof. They got tons of views on their YouTube channel. Go and check that out, and follow on Twitter, all that good social media stuff.
Please do. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Much respect, man. Thank you.